Welcome to Chai Brews, your go-to podcast for all things AI at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. I'm your host, Daniel Duggin, with a bachelor's in computer science pursuing a master's in computer science. In each episode, we'll talk about the ways AI is revolutionizing education. We'll explore how AI is transforming teaching, learning, and our community. Whether you're a student, an educator, or simply curious about the future of learning, this podcast is for you.
My name is Stephen Rumbaugh, and I am the creative director for the university. I work in the Division of Communications and Marketing.
I'm Billy Weeks. I'm an associate lecturer of communication in the communication department, and I teach photojournalism and storytelling.
One of obviously the big topic for all the interviews we've done so far has kind of been artificial intelligence, and both of y'all kind of being in the photojournalism space. I know that there's kind of been a lot of questions about maybe image generation, and I know, Steve, that's kind of more so in your domain. So if you kind of want to talk about your creative process in designing things for UTC versus now with AI, maybe how it's enhanced it, maybe some of the challenges, and maybe some of the things that were a little off-putting or things that are helpful now. If you kind of want to talk about the creative process then versus now.
So AI has sort of, what it's done for my line of work is it's sort of simplified the process, and it's sped it up quite a bit. So if I'm editing a photograph that's going to end up in a brochure or a postcard, let's say, you kind of want it to look the best it can. And so if there's a trash can in the background or a backpack or a bottle of water, usually you don't want that sort of thing.
Right.
And so in the old days, you would have to kind of go in there and meticulously use the Photoshop tools, and it's still kind of like that. It's not like AI has made all of that trouble go away, but it has improved the process, made it more efficient and quicker. But for the most part, and even when you do come up with something that you like, I almost always still have to go in there and do a little bit of tweaking.
Yeah, and to kind of get a visual for that, what tools are you using beforehand and kind of what tools are you using now? Before AI was pretty popular, and then now with some of the things you just mentioned?
Well, the new versions of Photoshop, I don't know, about a year ago, they had the beta versions, which I was using a little bit, but it was very primitive. And then it's improved, and in the last couple versions that have come out, it's been a lot better, and it continues to get better. But like I say, it can be pretty unpredictable. And if you're trying to do something very specific, like I want to add a dog, or and you can be specific and say, I want to add a beagle, or I want a Doberman in there, something like that. It just kind of does it, and it may not be exactly where you want it. So it definitely is not a perfect system, and it's
right.
It's still, and I realize we're still in sort of the infancy stage, but yeah.
Right. So, Billy, I'll kind of throw this question to you. So, with you being a photojournalism professor, have you talked about maybe addressing the authenticity and context related to AI technologies, maybe in photo creation? Again, I don't know exactly what your class entails, so maybe if you want to discuss a little bit of how your photojournalism classes are set up and, again, kind of maintaining authenticity of photos.
Well, we work with news situations and feature situations, so my job's completely different than what Steve does, and he's dealing with art and marketing, and I must say that AI I think has its place in society. I mean, it does. You can't run from technology. Technology's there. You gotta figure out how it best fits in the category that you're working in. And for me, right, in the news industry, AI as content is probably not acceptable. This is not the first time we've dealt with this. I mean, Photoshop's been around for a long time. It has, the tools in Photoshop has tremendous power, and you can change things, right? And typically in journalism, what we're allowed to do in a photo is to remove dust spots and crop and enhance the photo in a way by toning it. That's typically what I allow in class. We're all about telling stories with the camera,
Right.
and then enhancing the image with the software.
Awesome. So I guess with both of you guys kind of being heads and tails of a coin almost with the tools both of you use, I guess if you kind of maybe want to talk about, you both mentioned Photoshop, maybe from earlier in your careers with working with marketing and working with journalism, maybe talk about the shift from earlier in your career to when Photoshop rolled out to now with AI and kind of how people in your respective fields have reacted to each change as technology has only improved.
I'm not really sure how to answer that other than it just, with each version, certain things will get easier. And there have been kind of, there are tools in there that are sort of like a crude version of AI that have always been there. For example, there's a tool that's called a clone stamp. I think that's what it's called, right? And that's been that's very helpful. And when you're trying to get rid of something, because what it's doing is taking all of the pixels that's around that specific area and it's putting them in there, so you don't end up with a noticeable blemish in your photo.
So here's kind of the timeline for me. Started out mostly working with black and white film. That turned to work with slide film. That converted into working with color negative film, which became where we would scan it by a digital scanner. You could do a few things with that scanner, not a lot, but a few. Photoshop came around, I want to say in the early 90s, and obviously changed throughout those years. What you can do in Photoshop today, in my opinion, is light years ahead of what we could do, with Photoshop 3, which I think is where I picked it up. And it was important, right? And there was AI involved in that, but it was very small compared to what it is today.
And Billy, kind of another question for you. So we've talked a lot about storytelling and conveying an image of some sort. Do you think some of these AI tools have maybe encouraged critical thinking skills and discernment among students as far as your course content goes and maybe capturing a story? Or do you think some of these, and maybe kind of the opposite side, have you seen any cases where maybe some of these newer tools have kind of harmed that creative process in a sense?
So I don't see it very often. It does come up in conversation every once in a while. Particularly if we have a hard story, somebody might bring up maybe we should think about this. I pretty much discourage that for my journalism classes. Right, it's not a good fit there as a storytelling tool to go along with the story. Now, there are some areas there where AI could work, and particularly in the newspaper business, right? It certainly helps with understanding the community.
Right.
If you were going to sell more newspapers, there's great value in having all that data and stuff available to you, and that could be generated by AI. It might, because there is a good bit of graphic arts that's used in journalism. So I could see it there for SIGs and logos and other kinds of things. It might be able to play a role in that to make the newspaper industry maybe a little more coordinated. But as far as my classes go, not too much. We just don't use it a whole lot for what I teach.
Right. Maybe not so much I guess a better way to ask it is not really in a classroom sense, but maybe in the actual field of journalism in general. Have you kind of seen maybe some elements of storytelling and creativity take a hit or maybe be improved in some cases?
Yeah, and actually I'll give you an example of just one for us. We did our yearly photo night a couple of weeks ago, the first week of March. Well, we wrote press releases and sent them out and to the various media that we could find. And all of a sudden, because I get Google alerts when my name shows up, I got a Google alert from the BNN, which I from the best I could tell, is a news organization that's based in Pakistan. I think that's correct. And they had AI'd a story about us on photo night, and The photo they used for that was actually something that looked like New Year's Eve down at the aquarium. Everybody's celebrating photos down there. And the story, had some merit to it. I mean, it said where we were, when we were, what time we were, what building we were in. But the actual rest of it was not on target. And it could have and probably did affect us in some way. I will tell you that we were in the Roland Hayes Center and it was full of people at photo night. So I don't know if it brought people to us,
Right.
or if we ended up losing some and maybe we could have had more, or if it had no effect at all. I don't know the answer to that. But we talked about that in class and how, being a creative thinker and a writer and, a storyteller, how AI can affect that. And this was an example that was just handed to us at the last minute.
So I guess for both of you, going forward, where do you see kind of some of these technologies affecting each of your fields? And kind of like we've talked about a little bit already with the visual history, do you think it'll get to a point where you can't really track down what's real and what's not? And I guess maybe kind of what might help with that is maybe talking about how visual history was maybe easier to track down earlier versus now versus maybe 5-10 years from now.
Okay. Well, for me, the camera companies are already trying to create not really a watermark, but a tag, a digital tag of some kind that says that the image is created by their camera. It's to their advantage to be able to do that.
Okay.
So it's also a good marketing tool to say Nikon won the Pulitzer Prize this year. So they are trying to do that. Is that going to be effective? I don't know. I think possibly that might be a way to to start looking for images that that really were created more than taken. So just to think about what we're dealing with here is that we're converging ideas of what might be real and what might have been created. I think both have their place. But I think we've got to really think about how society and how the community is going to judge those images going forward. I don't know where we're going with it. You can't run from the technology. You cannot. I know photographers that ran from when we went from film to digital, and it didn't work out well for them. That's not even an option to me. What's an option to me is to teach people who want to tell truthful stories to, be credible. That's what's important to me.
That was
Stephen Rumbaugh.
Billy Weeks.
And I'm Daniel Duggin. Thanks for tuning in. The music in this podcast is by Blue Dot Sessions. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And until next time, keep learning and exploring the possibilities of AI.